This is Marla. Welcome back to my channel and my final Not Too Shabby Shop December Box of the Month Design Team project. I'm going to be creating using the ephemera and paper pads from the Box of the Month, which is still available, and I will have it linked in the description box below. The ephemera packs, the first one is coordinating with the fawns in winter, and it does have a blue, brown, pink, and gray tone to both the ephemera and the pattern paper. There's a look at some of the woodland critters. There's also a girl and some accessory items. And then the second paper pad is called Snow Critters. It's more of a pastel and it has little bears. There are some Christmas elements with the sleighs. You can use the bears in the teacups or the coffee cups for coffee invitations, cards that are coffee themed, and also for baby cards. So I am going to create all occasion cards. I've chosen to leave any sentiments off this so that I can add a sentiment at a later date. I'm going to begin by doing some ink blending with some Distress Oxide inks in Weathered Wood, Kitsch Flamingo, and Vintage Photo. I thought that these blended well with the paper pad. I am going to end up toning down the Kitsch Flamingo with a little bit of Tattered Rose because it was a little bit bolder of a pink once I chose my pattern paper. So I didn't have a lot of pink in my pattern paper, and it just was standing out a little bit more than what I wanted. As I ink blend this, I am not worried about whether or not I'm having a perfect blend because this is going to be covered up with some die cuts and some ephemera pieces. What I'm looking for is having those colors peek out and just add a little bit more interest to my card. You certainly can create really easy peasy cards by just using the pattern paper and the ephemera, but I really like to break up my ephemera and pattern paper using other embellishments and elements that I create myself using some of the pattern paper and ink. So for this one, I'm using ink on this die cut arch. That arch happened to be laying on my desk, and I thought, well, why not use it? I create on the fly. I don't usually plan what I'm creating, so that was sitting there, and I chose to use it as one of my layers. Of course, because it is Distress Oxide, I do love to add that oxidation by just adding a little bit of water splatter over the top of it. But I wanted to get some texture on this card. I think that texture in the form of ribbons and fabric and things like that really add just that little extra to the card. So I did use my corrugator, and I did end up corrugating that arch to give that nice texture in the background. And here's where I'm just toning down that pink. You can see to the right the pattern papers that I've chosen for my card today. I'm going to start with a die cut from my stash that's a heart. So I can use this as a Valentine's card. I could use it as a birthday card, a friendship card. There's a lot of different themes that can go with the style of the card that I'm creating. So this heart is just going to be another embellishment, another another piece that's going to add interest to my composition. And you'll see that it has that beautiful dark cocoa brown to the pattern paper, and then my layering piece underneath is going to have more lighter tones of that brown. I'm going to bring in a little bit of that pink and gray with that wreath, and I'm just going through all of my different options for adding a critter or something to the bottom. I am going to end up going with that deer, but I still feel like I'm missing a little bit of something on that arch. So we're going to cut this pattern paper, which is going to be our base layer, down to 4 by 5 1/4 inches. I will bring in an A2 top folding card base that's gray. And then I had this piece of 1 inch pattern paper that came from the same paper pad in the blues, and I thought that I was going to go with this light color, but it's falling really flat. It's just really boring. And so I ended up turning it over, and I was like, oh, wait a second. I really like this darker blue, and you're going to see that that pop of color on that arch at the bottom with all of the other patterns is really just going to brighten up and really help that arch kind of stand out instead of blend in. So I'm just laying everything down, making sure that I like it. I did end up using that lighter color on the reverse side. That one right there. I did cut another piece down to 1/4 inch, and I'm going to layer that on top of this piece of cardstock. So I'm going to add this to the bottom portion of my arch. I'm going to trim it off, and then I'm going to add that 1/4 inch strip, and I still feel like it needs a little bit more texture, and I'm going to add that additional texture with a piece of twine that I have. So I'm going to cut the twine down, and then I'm going to double the twine, and once I double that twine, I am going to go ahead and tie it in a bow onto the right side of that arch, and you're going to see that that just really adds, it steps up the appearance of this card. As I mentioned, I think that pattern paper and ephemera is really pretty together, but I also think that it is more interesting and it adds a different beauty when you add layers. So I've attached my card panel to my card base, and now I'm just going to add this bow over to the right hand side, and you're going to see how just breaking up the two pieces of pattern paper between the heart and the background layer with this arch and the additional texture that I've added to the bottom portion of it is going to change this card from boring to interesting. I'm just going to straighten out that thread, and then I'm going to cut my tails off, get everything, I'm going to make that bow just a little bit smaller, and I'm going to start putting everything in place. So I'm going to start with my heart. I'm going to add that at an angle over to the right side. I'll layer my wreath towards the bottom, and then I'm going to add my deer. I thought I was going to start gluing it down, and then I realized that I always like to pop things up. I'm a dimension girl. If you're not a dimension person, you certainly can go without the dimension. I'm leaving room to where that twine that I've added is going to go in between both of those pieces of dimensional tape so that I don't have any lumpy, bumpy areas. And once I remove the release paper, that's going to complete my card. So here I'm just going to make my bow a little bit smaller. Actually, it isn't going to complete my card. I do need to add the buttons. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. I will trim off the ends of it. And then I have a bag of vintage buttons that I purchased off of Etsy. And I think that adding that touch of dark brown ties in the dark brown heart. I'll add some glue to the center, use my reverse tweezers to hold that in place, and that will complete card number 1. So for card number 2, I'm going to go a little bit easier. I'm going to make this super simple. I'm going to start with the Snow Critters pattern paper. I'm going to choose a blue piece of pattern paper, and I'm going to cut it down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. Once I get this pattern paper cut down, I am going to bring in the ephemera. So I've chosen 3 pieces of ephemera from the Snow Critters collection. I have the little bear that's sitting in the coffee cup, and then I have 2 of the floral pieces. It's falling a little bit flat. It's kind of boring not adding additional color to my composition. So I did go back into that pattern paper. I found a snowflake pattern that was had a white base, and then it had the blue snowflakes. And I think that that complements the pinks in the ephemera pieces that I used a little bit better. It's helping those elements to stand up off my card a little bit better, but I want to add another pop of color with this green. So I will cut down this piece of green ribbon and I'm going to just tape it to the back. I'll adhere it using tape on the back of the card panel using some masking tape. And then off camera, I'm going to tie my bow. I do tie my bows off camera because of my fingernails. It takes me a couple of tries, unless I'm using like my bow at all or something like that. It just takes me a couple of tries. So rather than wasting your time, I just go ahead and tie my bows off camera. So again, adding that ribbon to my composition is really going to add a little bit more interest, a little bit more texture to this card. I adhered my panel to a A2 top folding card base, and then I have this wonky stitched oval that I'm going to add to the center, and I'll start adding my ephemera pieces. Again, I'm not going to add any sentiments to this card. I'm going to leave it blank so that I can use it for any occasion that I might need it for. I'm finding that I'm doing this a little bit more and more. I always need birthday cards. I always need thank you cards. And so sometimes I'll use those sentiments. But you know, if I just want to send a note or in a pinch I need something else, then I leave the sentiment off, and it really helps me to be able to grab something and just get it in the mail. I used my reverse tweezers to hold my glued ribbon in place, and then I'm going to add some foam tape to the back of my little bear, and that's going to give it that interest and a little bit of lift off the page. And here we go, I'm going to remove that. The box of the month is going to be released in January. On the 1st, there is going to be a hop over on the Not Too Shabby Shop channel. This box, as I mentioned, is still available. If you want to be guaranteed a box, you do need to subscribe. By subscribing, you not only get a discount, but when the boxes sell out, which they often do, you are guaranteed that one will be mailed to you. So if you'd like to subscribe to the box of the month, head over to the Not Too Shabby Shop using the link that I have in the description box below. All right, I'm going to add this second piece of ephemera right here. As I mentioned, I was adding it more towards the left center. And now I'm going to add, again, some more texture and interest to these ephemera pieces. I have these cloth, they're made out of some sort of material, little flower pieces, and all I do is layer them up together. I got these in a D-stash a long time ago. I have a lot of dried flowers that I used to use when I made mini albums, and so I thought that I would add that little bit of texture again to the top of the card. I placed 2 of the flowers. I made them 3 layers deep, and then I have these little bow bunny enamel dots that I'm adding. That's a blue, that's a nice match to the pattern paper, and I added those to the center, and then I'll glue those 2 flowers in between the floral ephemera pieces, trim down my bow, and then that will complete my second card. So I hope you got a little bit of an idea of how to add other textural pieces and elements to your cards using the paper pads and the ephemera pieces as a jumping off point. I hope you all have a very happy new year. I want to thank you so much for joining me in 2022. Here's a last look at my cards, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Thanks so much for watching.